Now, as made apparent by his work, Mr. Choksy encompassed a broad spectrum of law and politics. We will now hear from one of his contemporaries who also excelled in both fields. A renowned academic who was in turn the professor and then dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of Colombo and then vice-chancellor of the university in its entirety. He has held fellowships and lectured at many globally renowned universities, such as the Universities of Oxford, Cambridge, and London. He has also held ministerial portfolios for education, justice, and foreign affairs. Please give a warm round of applause to Professor Dr. G.L. Peiris.
Venerable members of the Mahasangha, honorable judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Court of Appeal, honorable the Attorney General, the Minister of Justice, President's Council, members of the Bar, the honorable leader of the opposition, Mr. Sajith Premadasa, the honorable Namal Rajapaksa, the honorable Dr. Bandula Gunavarthana, members of the Choksy family, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me deep and genuine pleasure to add this tribute to the enduring legacy of Mr. K.N. Choksy. There are many reasons for this, but pardon me to say that the main reason, which I feel very happy to do this, is a personal one. Throughout my career, I have passed through interesting periods, instructive periods, and also dangerous periods. The most dangerous among these periods was not after I came into politics, but during my tenure of office as Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo. That is the time at which the late Mr. K.N. Choksy was, for me, a great tower of strength. Many of us have short memories, and we have forgotten what life was like in those days. It was indisputably the most turbulent epoch in the history of the university system of our country. My predecessor, the late Professor Stanley Vijayasundara, was shot dead in his own office. Everything in the country closed down. Schools, universities, hospitals, and banks. And many people paid the supreme penalty. Not just politicians, but government officials, the members of the private sector, journalists, artists. All these people were slaughtered at that time. One scribbled note had a far more draconian impact than any emergency or curfew that was promulgated by the government in power. When it was all over, the then president, the late President Ranasinghe Premadasa, sent for me. And he told me, I want you to do something. I know it is rather challenging under present circumstances, but you can't say no. I want you to do this for me. So I asked me, yes, sir, what would you like me to do? He said, I want to appoint a presidential commission to probe the causes of this extraordinary phenomenon. Not in a spirit of vindictiveness, not to hound anybody out, but to find out what it is that caused this calamity of unprecedented magnitude in the history of our country, and more importantly, what are the pragmatic measures which we need to adopt to prevent a recurrence of a situation of this kind in the foreseeable future. So he told me, I want you to be the chairman of this commission and to write this report. Now, this was a matter in respect of which I worked very closely with the late Ken Choksy. Now, when I went home, I realized that it would not be possible for me to function as chairman of this commission. There was too much pressure. I was told, this is far too hazardous. Your predecessor was shot 3 weeks ago, so you can't possibly accept this appointment. So I had to go back to the president and said, I can't be chairman. So he told me, that's all right. The main thing I want you to do is to write the report, which I agreed to do. Now, throughout the evolution of that report and the formulation of the principal recommendations which constituted its substance, the nuances, the fine-tuning in all of that, the late Mr. Choksy was of inestimable value. Now, this is one of the most fascinating things which I have done in my time. I worked with a group of very eminent people, Professor Lakshman Jayatilaka, Vice Chancellor of Peradeniya University, Dr. Radhika Kumaraswamy, Mr. Ralph Allis, who was principal of D.S. Senanayaka Vidyalaya. There was a novelist called Monica Ruwan Patirana. We all worked at home, sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning, compiling this report. So when it was ready, we submitted it to President Ranasinghe Premadasa, who told us, this is the first report of a presidential commission which was submitted to me on time. Nobody else has done it so far. Everybody came, asked me for 3 months, 6 months, you haven't done it. And I appreciate that genuinely. Then about 2 weeks later, after he had had the opportunity of reading the report, he asked me to come and meet him again. And then he asked me, now you have made several principal recommendations. I think there were about 37 recommendations in all. And he asked me, in your opinion, what is the most critical of these recommendations? I want to implement these. I have the political will to do so. And I would like your advice as to where I should start the process of implementation. So I told him, in my opinion, and Mr. Choksy agreed with me on this, I told him, in my view, the seminal recommendation was the one which we had made with regard to the Nominations Commission. The reason for this is clear. We had sittings all over the country, from Jaffna to Mathura, from Colombo to Batticaloa. These were facilitated by Mr. Bradman Virukwan on the instructions of the then president. So he spoke to angry young people all over the country. And we asked them, why did you do this? What had Professor Stanley Vijayasundara done? Why did you slaughter all these people? What rhyme or reason could there be? We spoke to principals of schools, members of the Mahasangha, the Bishop of Colombo at that time, other religious leaders. Now what the angry young men and women told us was, we know that our country is going through a difficult period, a time of adversity. That is all right. That happens to all countries from time to time. We will put up with it temporarily. However, what we will not put up with is adversity combined with palpable injustice. If there are only 50 jobs to be found out, and if those jobs are given on the basis of merit, we will accept that. But if those jobs are made available to people on other criteria, including connections, bribery, and other such circumstances, then we will rebel against it. So this was the fundamental grievance. Not just poverty, adversity, hardship, but a pervasive sense of injustice. The rationale underpinning the recommendation with regard to the Nominations Commission was the whole object of depoliticization. Depoliticization. Jobs to be given on merit. I think My colleague Mr. Ali Sabri will agree with me. This was the genesis of the 17th Amendment to the Constitution of Sri Lanka, the Nominations Commission. See, a Constitutional Council was established and a series of independent commissions, all of which subserved this fundamental purpose of removing partisan political influence from the decision-making, the evaluating process, leading to significant appointments in the state sector. So the origin of that was contained in this recommendation, which I told President Ranasinghe Premadasa was, in my view, the most important of the recommendations which the Youth Commission had made. Then, here again, Mr. Choksy was very intimately involved in the work that we were doing. We asked these people, why cannot you resolve these problems by a more acceptable process within a democratic framework? And they said, it is simply not possible. Our voices are not heard. We are operating at the fringes of society. We are not considered relevant at all. Now, this was a sad reality, but this is exactly what was told to us. We were told the only way to make decision makers sit up and take note is by resorting to unmitigated violence. Killing people, burning, destroying. That is the only way that we can focus the attention of society on the grievances which we are endeavoring to articulate. Now, that was the origin of a series of recommendations relating to youth representation and women's representation. Topics which are critical today as the country prepares for local government elections, which we understand are likely to be held in early April. Now, these are burning topics even today. But that whole debate was triggered by this recommendation that was contained in the report of the Presidential Commission. And Mr. Choksy was of immense assistance in formulating, refining the proposals relating to youth representation and women's representation. Another matter in which the late Mr. K. N. Choksy took a lively interest had to do with the basic complaint that was made to us when we asked what's wrong with our society. Why are you reacting with this kind of indignation? Some leading school principals and some religious leaders told us, I'm sure Venerable Assaji will probably agree, that one of the problems with our society is the singular lack of role models. Role models are not there. What do you tell a growing child in a school? Model your life like so and so. Very difficult. Now, the problem at heart there was a sense of cynicism, skepticism. This was highlighted in the recommendations. Now we can see that the unbalanced and incomplete nature of our educational system. There must be something basically wrong with our society. I mean, 2 people were killed yesterday outside the Manor courts. Murder is today an everyday occurrence. If you look at the news bulletins in the evening, there's hardly a day passes without people being murdered on the streets. So there is a sense of disquiet. Children are not happy. Childhood is not relaxed. Enormous tension, competition, tuition classes, rat race. So all of these are characteristics of our society, and many of which were addressed with finesse and sensitivity in the recommendations of the Commission. Then just one other point. What I noticed about the late Mr. Choksy, I have worked with other very distinguished members of the Bar, President's Council in this country, But one distinguishing characteristic, which I would like to mention on this occasion, is that as Vice Chancellor, when I consulted him on legal matters, he would advise me not just on the law. I mean, he had a prolific knowledge of the law, but he would also advise a practical course of action, given all the circumstances of the matter. Now, this I found to be of great value. So these are the reasons why, as I said at the beginning, it is a matter of genuine pleasure for me to have this opportunity of paying this tribute to the legacy, the inspiring memory of the late Kaishap Nariman Choksy. I have worked thereafter. I have been in touch with members of the Choksy family, Mr. Vistas Choksy in particular, and Mrs. Srini Choksy. He is following in the distinguished footsteps of his father. I wish him well. And permit me once again to express my warm appreciation of the contribution that was made by the late Mr. Choksy, not just to the law, not just to the legal profession, not to the evolution of our jurisprudence, but to a variety of aspects of public life in our country. Thank you very much indeed.